So let's dive right in to the webinar, and I just want to make sure that everyone can see this. Yes, okay. I'm seeing some thumbs up, and I'm just going to move everyone's little images so that I can see my presentation too. So just going to start with a brief overview of what is co-housing. It's a planned residential neighborhood that combines private homes with shared indoor and outdoor spaces that are designed to support an active, interdependent community life. As you may know, co-housing is a concept that originated in Denmark and elsewhere in Europe. And since the 1990s, it has really spread throughout North America and is now present in most provinces throughout Canada. And it can range, as you can see here from the brief facts in the top left corner, it can range from anywhere to 8 to 40 households. Usually there's some shared values, common house, etc. What can co-housing look like? As you can see, different models are available. You have this bottom left corner option where you're essentially looking at a half circle with a central courtyard. It could be stacked units for more urban areas. I know in Vancouver they have one. You can have them dispersed with the common house at the center. Or there is this hybrid model as well that we see on the right. So it can look a lot of different ways. Co-housing balances privacy and community. So everyone has their own individual homes or units, but there's also shared space, a common house, and usually a lot of community activities. For example, community dinners like we see here over here on the right-hand side. Other things that you can share through co-housing: ideas, ups and downs of life, meals, of course. Usually sharing the common house is a really big perk to living in a co-housing community. Caregiver suites and services, cleaning and maintenance can be shared, and also tools and equipment, because frankly, not every individual home needs a lawnmower or their own individual workshop, for example. These are things that can be shared and can also result in cost savings. Other things you can share: gardens, workshop and craft spaces, exercise facilities, childminding for intergenerational co-housing communities, co-working space, utilities, and teen and children rooms. So Cohabitat Suite Fern Co-Housing. This is our logo. And it represents the bilingualism in Sudbury, the many lakes. You could see a little bit of blue there at the bottom, the many lakes that we enjoy in our area. And the name sweet fern, it's a northern plant, it's extremely hardy, and it can also be used as a medicinal plant. So who is Cohabitat Sweet Fern Co-Housing? Our members consists of people aged 2 to 75. In the top left-hand corner over here, we see Jim and Monique. Over here, Tom and Rebecca and their kids. Harriet, Jeanne, Joanne at the bottom right-hand corner. That's me and my partner Jessica, and that is Miriam and her pet dolphin. So essentially, we have people from all walks of life. We have engineers, some journalists, speech pathologist, child care worker, yoga instructor, amateur photographer, musician, painter, student. And we enjoy an array of activities. Some of us enjoy singing in a choir. Some of us dance salsa, for example. Some of us garden. Not me, I don't have a green thumb, not yet. And many of us enjoy traveling, especially in the pre-COVID era. So we support our community through volunteer work, attending cultural events, and funding worthwhile ventures. moving on to our vision and mission. This is essentially here to help guide our group toward our goal of co-housing. Having a written document helps us guide our decisions during the development phase and also once we are in our forever home. We are going to get to know each other and have gotten to know each other already through play and work, building relationships before the buildings. Essentially, that is the credo that's going to help us ensure the success of our co-housing project. Our values. We believe that a group needs direction and a framework within which to live, and we feel that these values are going to serve us well in developing our community. With trust, trust is essentially built when we engage with each other, when we talk to each other, essentially get to know what makes each other tick, and you can understand people's way of thinking, their personalities, and learn to trust them. Independence speaks to autonomy and privacy of the person, which is still a very important component to co-housing. Interdependence means we value working as a group and to solve problems, and that essentially the idea that groups make better decisions than individuals. Generosity and compassion, we agree to contribute to the group with our own individual talents and knowledge and to care for our neighbors. We recognize that these are key to our happiness. Stewardship speaks to sustainability, the health of our group, the community, and the planet. So that could mean gardens, it could look like ecological building materials or passive house construction, gray water collection, for example, promoting car sharing, recycling, reducing the use of plastics and things like that. So our decision-making model, what does that look like? We have adopted sociocracy as our way of making decisions. So to ensure that everyone's voice gets heard and everyone's voice matters, we are transparent about our concerns and we raise them in a group setting. And we are transparent about our ultimate decisions, which are made as a group and they are recorded and made available. Our minutes and our budgets are all accessible as well. Okay, so what is our pathway to membership for Sweet Fern? The path to household membership is that you could start out as a friend where you are welcome to attend 4 meetings and socials. The idea here is to meet the group, see how we function. The next step is the explore phase, where you would work with us for 3 months, see how it feels to be involved, and if you decide that you can work with us. At this stage, you do not get a vote. So, and the idea as well is that an explorer would participate in at least 1 circle. And of course, the contribution of $350 per household. That's for the explore phase. Then the full member status is where all of the members are currently right now. We have all made a contribution of $3,900 minus the $350 that would have been paid by each and every one of us as an explorer, and that goes toward operating costs. As a full member, you are expected and required to make the cash calls as the project develops, and it is developing. And this step also comes with the right to vote at meetings and ultimately gives you a home in our community. So our next steps. First of all, we are really excited to announce that we are officially incorporated. So that was the next step that we've actually achieved. We are now looking to continue to grow our membership. Our site search has begun, so we have a few irons in the fire. Group building skills, we do have an agreement with a professional team, Cohousing Options Canada and Home Opportunities. So we do have a professional team that we work with. And we are now starting to discuss our site design, units, and our common house, which is a really exciting phase to be in. So our this completes this section of our presentation. Check us out at sweetferncohousing.ca. Upcoming events, we do have our first annual general meeting on May 30th. That's Saturday. We have a coffee and co-housing. So if you know of anyone that you think would be interested, they want to ask us more questions in kind of an informal setting, June 12th is the day to do it. And we have another business meeting on June 27th. Feel free to reach out to us, and you can email us. We're on Facebook as well, so there are a number of ways to reach out. So before I move on, I'd like to ask if there are any questions right now about this presentation. And if not, that's okay. You could either type them in the chat or ask them live. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to load up, and don't worry, it's not a crazy PowerPoint here. This is just to show, let me do this here. There we go. So I'd like to introduce you now to our panelists, our speakers. So I'm going to introduce you to them and give their biographies essentially one at a time, so that you don't get to the third speaker and you're wondering, what was that person about? So I'm going to introduce them one at a time. And after the bio, I'm going to invite the respective speaker to just talk about and give a brief overview of their co-housing community, 5-10 minutes max. And then we're going to have a discussion about it. So we're going to start off with Mary Kate Craig and her bio. So this is the Junction Village in Guelph, Ontario. Mary Kate Craig is a consultant. She is an entrepreneur and passionate community builder whose work is related to climate change action and the transition to low carbon living. Along with her husband, Mike, she's part of the social change landscape in Guelph, Ontario. Together, they believe in creating their lives in the way that makes sense for their family and listening to the ways that they are called into action in this world. Mike and Mary Kate are co-founders of an urban intentional community, the Junction Village, Guelph. It is the intention of this emerging community to nurture its members, to connect with and support each other, to transform how they live in the urban environment, to create neighborhoods that function at a high level and are grounded in love, even when they don't all agree. The Junction Village Guelph seeks to catalyze a successful transition to low carbon living, where its members can live lightly on the earth, eat great nourishing food, try out new ways of co-living, have each other's backs, and be lifelong learners. This is an inclusive, multi-generational space where each person has a voice and each life makes a difference, surrounded by amazing conversations, laughter, and love. All good things. So Mary Kate, I invite you to take it away for your brief presentation. Thank you.
For sure. I have a couple of pictures that might help just to bring this into being. So,
let me stop share.
Okay.
And then you ought to have the option of sharing, hopefully.
Okay, let's see. Looks like it's there. Let's see which one it is. I have a couple of things open. It's not telling me which one is which. Hang on.
But something is at least popping up on your share screen?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so that means that at least the function is enabled.
Okay, hang on one sec. I'm not sure if it's better on one or two screens, but if not, I can just tell you about it. Let's see if this comes up. Are you able to see that? Oh, hang on, it's this one. Here we go. Okay. Is that coming in? No.
Not yet. Sometimes there is a little bit of a lag.
It's saying, oh, it's wanting something else. There's something about security.
Mm. It could be that the capability has been disabled.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. I'll just tell you about it. So, and sometimes it's great to see it as pictures, but I can paint pictures with my words. So, where we are in Guelph, basically I don't think that we would call what we're doing at the moment a co-housing. We would call it an intentional community. And there are aspects of it that I think will become co-housing in the future. We've been going about 15 years, but it's really only within the last probably 5 or 6 years that we've really started to call ourselves something. Up until then, it was very organic. And I would say organic is a good word for what we do. So we have our house. So my husband and I and my 3 children live in a house close to downtown Guelph. And across the road from that house, there's a sixplex apartment building. And we purchased that sixplex apartment building probably 13 years ago. And then that has been completely retrofitted and now has solar panels and all the apartments have been changed. And gradually, because when we first purchased that building, it was full of very transient sort of population of people. And really, there wasn't a lot of community between ourselves and the people who lived in the apartment. And what's formed now is it really came out of me having my first baby and spending a lot of time breastfeeding, looking out the window. That's really what occurred. And in looking at this rundown apartment building, I kept thinking, that would be so much nicer if it was filled with our friends. And so it really is now. So those 6 apartments are filled with people who we live in community with. And then 2 years ago, we purchased the house next door to us. And the idea in purchasing the house next door is to create that heart, that co-living space. And it is a long way from that at the moment. Like it has 3 private rooms, but we have what is a hostel room, really like a series of alcoves. And there are some longer term people who live there, and there's it's listed on Airbnb, and we have people who sometimes just come and stay for a short time, and we have people who have through Airbnb lived with us for extended periods of time, 2 or 3 years. And actually the fact that it's has multiple points of entry really seems to work for some of those people. So there's lots of flow. And it was interesting to hear the description of how people become a member at Sweet Fern, because we're still trying to work that out. Like we also have a number of people who've bought houses close by or who live in the neighborhood, and it's really the community has been coming together around potlucks that we have been doing, which obviously in present times aren't happening. But usually for the last 12 years, there's been a potluck with a CSA drop off, like a vegetable drop off. And then and that isn't just for people who would be members, that's just an opportunity for really anyone who wants to come to it to come and connect. So that event had been running up until last summer, all summer long. And then we've also just found different ways of connecting. Sometimes that's around gardening, sometimes it's around childcare. It changes all the time according to what is actually needed. So everything is very much sourced by the people who are living in the community. At this time, we have had some shared ownership in the past, and at this time, the ownership of those 3 buildings is actually held by my husband and I and various sort of people who we can convince to co-sign with us. But we have formed an incorporated structure, the Junction Village, and we are trying to work out how to change that ownership structure. So in many ways, we've done things in an opposite way to how it sounds like you have done things at Sweet Fern, in that we've used existing infrastructure, but what we now have is like almost 3/4 of an acre in really close to downtown Guelph, in amongst these 3 existing buildings, and then plans for what we're going to create and what we're going to do, and then a group of people who are involved, long and short term. So that probably gives you a little overview of what we're about at the Junction Village, and I'm happy to answer any questions or try to make it a bit clearer. But we are definitely something that is emerging, although we've been around a long time.
Thank you so much, Mary Kate. Your trajectory is very interesting, and it's not. I mean, it's really interesting to hear speakers talk about having a different trajectory, because we're all coming at this from different perspectives. So it's interesting how you're coming at it. So what I'm going to ask is that if people have questions specifically with respect to Mary Kate, hang on to them. Don't forget them. I'm just going to power up the next speaker and introduce them, because that was essentially the idea here. And I just want to make sure that I have this. All right. Bear with me. Okay. So I think everyone can see that. Can everyone see it? Okay. So this is Diane Wiley. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. She can correct me if I'm not. So Diane is a founding member and a 25-year resident of Pioneer Valley Cohousing in Amherst, Massachusetts. She has shared her experience with other co-housing communities and provided training in facilitation, decision-making, group process, and policy development. She led public presentations on co-housing and facilitated introductory workshops on the benefits of co-housing, and in particular, senior co-housing as a strategy for aging successfully. She currently serves on the board of the all-volunteer Sage Senior Co-Housing Advocates organization. In her day job, she works as a grants manager for, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Mount Holyoke College. Her career has spawned many other fields, including marketing and communications, community outreach, arts programming, and nonprofit organizational development, training, and consulting. She loves traveling, hiking, and kayaking. So a big welcome to Diane Wiley, and please let me know if I didn't pronounce that right so that I can get it right. And we're going to hear from her about her either intentional community or co-housing community. Thank you.
Well, you pronounced everything right, just so, very good. I'm sitting on my porch, so I don't know if you'll hear background noise of a couple of kids running by. I was in the house a lot today, so I decided to give this a try. Can you hear kids yelling in the background?
Laughing, and yes, it's part of the background noise. It's adding the ambiance.
Exactly, exactly. I'm going to start my timer so I'm staying within time. So I'm focusing my comments on the theme you sent me, which was how a supportive community promotes well-being. And I thought about it in 2 ways. One is, and I will say we've been around 25 years, so we have been inventing and reinventing ourselves and our processes. So we've learned a lot, and I'd love to be able to share it. And we are an intentional community, I will say. We're just a form of an intentional community, which is the co-housing model. our decision-making, since that was brought up earlier, is dynamic governance, which is a version of sociocracy. And I want to talk two things. I'd like to talk about what we did during the pandemic to be supportive and promote well-being. But I'm going to start first with talking about one of our circles, sub-circles actually, is Care and Counsel. Care and Counsel is a resource for members who need help working through conflict. That is that's a big deal when you get into community and you're a community of people that came in with individual ideas and values and needs and desires. Conflict is normal, and having ways to support one another is really important. Over the years, our Care and Counsel circle has developed a number of strategies, and I was just going to show you a couple of slides. If I can also do the sharing here.
So if either Minik or Harriet can, and I'm not sure if you can, but if you can figure out how to share the share screen. Oh, there, we got it. We got something.
Okay, what are you seeing? The Zoom or the Care and Counsel and Cohousing?
Oh, now we're seeing Care and Counsel and Cohousing.
Good, that's what I would like you to see. So Care and Counsel has developed what they would call a menu of keeping connected through conflict. They're very clear that they're not about fixing anything. They're really about supporting people to work through conflict, whether it's one person and another person or a group of people. The idea is that the menu, if I can, this is a PDF, so I'm not sure how this works. That's our little bit of our community, likes to have fun. I'm going to skip our community vision. Well, actually, I'm going to go back. We envision a thriving community in which we celebrate life's joys and give solace in times of sorrow. Strive to be the someone else who will do it as a gift of generosity, to honor our neighbors, and out of love for our planet. Seek to transform ourselves through the creative forces of conflict and forgiveness. Welcome differences as connecting bridges while respecting healthy boundaries. And share our physical, emotional, and spiritual resources in the spirit of the co in cohousing. A lot of people over the years, many of us have done trainings that have been helpful to both managing our conflict and helping one another. We've done training in facilitation, which is helpful in resolving conflict, conscious communication, compassionate communication, Byron Katie. So, and many of the people in Care and Counsel who are especially interested in this have done additional training. So the menu, this is their flow chart, which I love. You call and say, I need some help. This is what's going on. And there'll be a listening, provide listening. And then they'll say, okay, well, we have different offerings that you could pursue. And then you can, I've done mediation. I've done listening circles. So I don't know if they made a list of what here they are. So they have a booklet that any of us can get, a hard copy or online, to look at any of these strategies for helping to process conflict. And I'm happy to share this if Sweet Fern or anyone else would like a copy of the booklet. It's very available. And I think that's it. Yeah, they have different worksheets, and it's just incredibly helpful. Just go back to this. So I think that's a really, this is a core piece of fostering community well-being, individual well-being. Like I said, they're not here to fix us. The circle is here to facilitate working through conflict. So that's really fast. I wanted to talk about how we promoted well-being during the pandemic. because that was a unique situation that really tested all of us and how we were going to be able to stay connected. So in general, generally we changed the way we operated, the way we gathered. Oh, I'm going to stop the share. Sorry, probably don't need this. We had to change how we socialize. We have normally, in the before times, as they like to say, we've had two community meals a week, Mondays and Wednesdays, weekend brunches, and occasional potlucks. So we had to abandon all of that in the beginning. We just, there was no roadmap for how to get through all this. We closed our common house. I guess we're the dispersed model, going from what Renee was showing. We have 27 acres, 32 units. We're on a big horseshoe and have a common house at the bottom of the horseshoe. So it was very sad. The common house really is the life center of the community. It's where we get our mail. So we had to figure out a different way to get our mail out on the porch. We had to train all the UPS and FedEx people to not drop boxes all over the place, but to get them on a table on the front porch. We had a few exceptions. We had kids who were home. We have one family with 5 children. So they all worked on remote school in the common house, but otherwise it was closed. We do have a laundry room in the basement, and that was open with very particular protocols. You had to schedule it on a Google Calendar with an hour in between, those sorts of things. We discouraged visitors to the community. We did grocery shopping for those who were comfortable going grocery shopping, for those who were not, or we also had delivery service going on. We did continue to meet by Zoom, got pretty good at it. And then we also did a lot of social stuff outside. We had dance parties. We had movie nights until it got too cold. We do have snow and cold here in New England. And had to go to Zoom, and we had games online, celebrated holidays and birthdays online. And then as we came through the winter, we started having meals. You bring your own plates and dishes and silverware, and could sit outside or go home with your food. People were incredibly creative. We had barbecues in the middle of winter. Just any excuse to be able to be near each other, but socially distanced with masks, and going for walks. People would go for walks with masks. We have some lovely trails, but if find places where you could be 6 feet apart and still hear each other. And we continue to do that. Operationally or structurally, a COVID prep group was convened, and it was a group of people who volunteered to meet and think about how to set up these protocols and what was open, what was closed. And they weren't a decision-making group. They created recommendations. And it was comprised of a very broad range of 8 people, some who were like research geeks who wanted to read all of the medical stuff, and people who were very fearful that wanted to make sure that they could be part of making sure that everybody was safe and that we were very conservative. So it was a lot of diversity of opinion, just like our community. And I will say our community is a microcosm of the world out there, which is some people were very comfortable, were not worried about COVID, and other people were terrified. And so we had to manage having things closed for the people who were conservative while kind of irritating the people who felt it was okay. And they helped other circles establish policies. We also developed an emergency contact form that everybody put next to their door so that if anybody got sick, we all knew who to get in touch with. And that's just generally a really great strategy, regardless of COVID. There was also a COVID care group that were volunteers who would go and check on members, because we had a lot of single people who lived alone. So it was very isolating. And if we have a lot of introverts. And so when they don't have easy ways to socialize, they could get very isolated. So the COVID care group was good. The last thing I'll mention, because I'm out of time, we created pods, and that was groups of 8 groups of 4 households that would meet regularly, and they would choose among themselves how they would meet. So in the fall, we met around a fire pit till it was too cold, then we met by Zoom. And that was a really great way, again, for people who were isolated to have an immediate way to connect with their pods. Some of the pods did really well and met every week, others met twice a month. That also allowed, we have associate members, so we have 32 households, but we have a lot of associate members off campus that could connect as well. So it's really hard for them to be part of the community. So I'd say the pods were generally very successful. So I'll stop there. I want to give a quote. I talked with one of my neighbors who's on the Care and Counsel group, and she said something that I loved. And she said, "We muddle with compassion, not always making decisions and choices that fit everyone's preferences, but we do work with compassion." And I think we all know that very, very well after 25 years. So we still get mad at each other. We're not each other's best friends, but we have learned that, to echo what Mary Kate said, or what her introduction, we deal with a lot of love. We really put out a lot of love. And that's what I think intentional community of any stripe is really about, is learning how to let go. You don't always get your way, but caring for each other is number one. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Deanne. Really interesting to hear how your already existing co-housing community has dealt with the pandemic and has navigated, because I was wondering how you tackled it, you know, especially in Massachusetts. I wasn't sure. So very, very interesting. I'm going to move on. And if you have any questions, of course, for Deanne, keep them in your back pocket and we're going to get to that. I would like to now present our next speaker, and it is Keith Shackleton. At 82, Keith is the oldest member at Terra Firma, and Terra Firma is in Ottawa, I believe, Ottawa, Ontario, and closely followed by another member. The youngest member is 2.5 years old. Keith spent most of his career in social work with children dealing with emotional, physical, and developmental challenges. He also spent a few years working with a charitable agency providing assistance to people in Africa, Asia, and Central America. Having grown up on a farm, Keith is deeply interested in food biodiversity and in nature. He also likes to build things. In 2004, Keith undertook to act as a general contractor to build an infill, which included his own unit, modifications to other units, and a lower level common area for terra firma. And that project included a solar thermal array, which provides hot water and heating for 4 households, plus the common house. Pretty cool. So I'm going to pass the mic to Keith Shackleton, who will give us a brief presentation on terra firma.
Hi, everyone. Let me know if I'm not coming through clearly at any point, and I'm happy to be part of this group. Terra firma tried to get going starting around 1992, and over the course of 5 years, we tried to buy things like schools that were being sold off, and we just couldn't compete with developers, and a lot of people came and went during that time. Eventually we found a pair of triples, so they were side-by-side townhouses, 3 and another 3, with a 20-foot driveway between them. My wife and I were members during those 5 years, but we didn't know if it was ever going to happen. And as events turned out, we went in a different direction, bought a smaller house, and then we later decided to share with our daughter. And then she informed us that she was having a third child and they wanted to get their own place. So we came back to terra firma in 2004 and said, can we work something out? So that's when we built the infill in the 20-foot, the 2 driveways, and with the common house at basement level. If you go on to the cohousing.ca site, you can see reference to terra firma and to, if you also go on Street View, for instance, we're on Drummond Street. We're half an hour walk from Parliament Hill in an older neighborhood. It used to be a lot of old people on our street, and now it's just filled with youngsters, which we love. I stand corrected, by the way. Our youngest member is 3.5, she told me today. So, but she's got a sibling on the way, so there will be another one. We have then 7 households who are in the condo. So those 7, the 6 units plus the new one, are legally structured as a condo. Originally, we started as something called tenants in common, and then we switched. I won't go into a lot of detail on that, but and both were problematic. But we've always had other members who are not in the condo who rented or bought places close by, and some people bought so they could be part of our community. And right now, so those members over the 24 years have come and gone a bit, but the members who are in the condo, all these households are still here, which I think says something about our tolerance for each other, I guess. And so these old houses built in the 1880s and not very great construction then. I think they were built for maybe railway workers. But they've been fixed up nicely over time. When terra firma first bought those houses and started tearing down the fences behind them, there was an uproar in the immediate community, and the neighbors hired a planner and a lawyer, drafted a bylaw, and tried to get us retroactively rezoned. There were meetings at City Hall. There was mention of Waco, if people remember that horrible situation where people were burned alive in Texas. Since then, we have become, I think, a core of our community. And this little old Ottawa East, as it's called, so we're on an island between the canal and the Rideau River. And it's becoming very much revitalized. There's a big, there was a plot of 25 acres that was owned by the Oblate religious order, and that's now being developed into townhomes and condos. So it's, the community is growing, and we have 2 blocks over on Main Street, we have a complete street now that has bicycle paths on both sides. And a lot of this is because of input from members of our community. We don't have a leader, of course. If we did, it would probably be Anthony Leaning, who is an architect. He has designed the first 2 passive house certified multi-unit buildings in North America. One for a group called Salas Corporation, which provides housing to people living with mental illness, and the other with a community housing group. So that's kind of us. We have wooden decks along the back. We have a lovely big backyard with all kinds of trees. We had a huge Manitoba maple that came crashing down last fall and crushed our bike shed. And that caused us a lot of work and effort. We got a new bike shed built, and we've now planted 6 trees and have another sweet cherry tree on the way. That's to replace the 3 that we lost when that one fell. We share meals twice a week in normal times, to just take turns cooking for one another, and somebody takes care of that. I'll talk a bit about, I think, caring for each other. By the way, we were connected with a group in New England. The leader's name was C.T. Butler, that developed a system called formal consensus. And I think that some of the other consensus methods like sociocracy were not really current at that time, and we actually helped to develop that system a bit. Since then, we've also started to use the color card system, and usually we forget it. So we've kind of graduated to informal consensus or just chatting things over. One of the things that we are thinking about a lot right now, myself particularly, is aging in place and how we're going to manage that. We have one push lawnmower, which I've never pushed. But I have done quite a bit of tree planting and vegetable planting, and all of a sudden our yard that used to be totally shaded is a lot sunnier than it was. That tree covered a huge section. I'll tell you a couple of stories. My wife is a few years younger than me, just turned 73. About 6 years ago, no, sorry, 10 years ago, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she had the full treatment with, first of all, one breast removed, and then chemo, radiation, etc. Before her, and she, by the way, at one stage of her career was a nurse, so quite comfortable with hospitals and all. And so she said, I'd like to do something to commemorate this event of losing my breath. And so the lady who organizes the schedule for the meals said, okay, this Wednesday, night before your operation, the women will be eating at my place, the men and kids will be eating in the common house. So each woman brought some little thing that was special, maybe a stone they had collected from a beach somewhere at a special time, with a little gift for Diane. They put hands on her. One of them composed a song about how when she was 11 and started to realize something was happening in her upper torso, and then at 15 the boys were watching, and in her 20s nursing her babies, and then later things started to go downhill. And the husband of this lady made a cake with 2 lumps on the top with cherries on the lumps, a boob cake. So my wife came home squealing with laughter and took a copy of the song to show the nurses at the operating room. I also had a brief hospitalization about 6 years ago. And one of our young members, after I got out, organized a healing circle, and people just came and sat. Some of our members are Quakers, and some are not connected to any particular religion. So the Quakers will sit in silence until somebody feels moved to speak, and then they'll speak and then go back to silence. So that's what happened, and it was very touching for me to have that. During the COVID, we've just tried to strike a balance of, we see each other in the backyard. Of course, we haven't been able to have our shared meals. We did about a year ago now, in a bit of frustration, I suppose, among other things, have a fashion show on the street. And people dressed up and paraded down the street, and somebody was an announcer. And there was one of our neighbors, not one of our members, who said, no, I don't think you should be doing that. You're setting a bad example. People are supposed to be distancing. But, and you know, even if you're obeying the letter of the law, you're not, you're setting a bad example. But anyway, we like that, and we're still friends. So we've also, the immediate community around us has become really connected. We have a Buy Nothing group, and my wife is a huge actor in that. Almost every day she's delivering something somewhere, or picking things up, putting her bid in to get one thing or another that usually we don't need. But so I think that's us, and we've become friends. We're like a family. We have our spats, and some people are closer to certain households than others. I think we're situated right in the middle, and we tend to be in the middle in terms of any social interactions that take place. We do some informal car sharing from time to time, and feed each other's cats when we're away. And we have keys to everybody's house. And I love living here. It's just what I wanted. And we love all the activity of the young kids on the street. And it's happy. I mean, there's obviously frustrations. It's not a perfect solution to everything, but and I'll just mention that there are at least 3 other groups and a couple that have given up in Ottawa area, but there's actually 4 that are working on developing now, and one of them is only 4 people who have they're ready to put shovels in the ground for women who are going to share a low-rise building that they are getting constructed for their needs with a common house, and they're not youngsters. So I'll stop there and to raise any questions that you have.
Thank you so much, Keith. And thank you for sharing your personal stories. I think it really adds color to how close you can get to other households and the way that you can connect, especially because our co-housing community is so young. We're not living in proximity to one another yet. So hearing those stories, it really helps to envision what it could look like, right? Because we're doing the Zoom thing right now, and finding that how we can reconnect through stories, I think, is really helpful. Okay, so I guess I would just want to start by asking our 3 panelists whether any of the 3 of you have anything to add or comment on about each other's brief presentations, anything that stood out to you, or anything like that. So I'll leave it to the 3 of you, and whoever wants to start can go ahead, and then we can people can start thinking about their questions maybe, and if you want to either type them in or speak up once we get to that, we can do that as well.
Renee, maybe I'll just jump in. I didn't really say too much about how, what's been happening here in the time of COVID, and kind of how I just really talked about the community itself. I don't know, do you want me to just briefly say some of the things that that happened here at the Junction Village?
Of course.
Yeah. Actually, lots of them are very similar to what has clearly been happening elsewhere. But yeah, we've done, we've obviously had to stop any eating together or any of those types of activities, but we have found so many different ways to connect together, and we've been having sometimes outdoor fires. We also had like a street dance party, and we had Zoom gatherings for a while, once a week. We've also been doing some shared visioning, and we created some different WhatsApp groups and things like that. But what I noticed, really the thing that struck me, and I think I heard that in the other presentations, in some ways, was that for in this community, I really got the impression that people weren't feeling alone at this time. Like that they're, even though we were having to isolate or we couldn't be together in the same way, I think there really was a feeling of being supported by each other, and that there was a group of people to listen if people needed to talk about something or if something was coming through. And the other thing, just to add in, kind of the central glue in this community is a course called On the Presence. And so almost everybody who lives in this community has done that course. And that really was the glue, I think, that held things together, especially through this time. So I think that's probably good, just to give you a kind of flavor of kind of what's been here.
I'm sorry if I missed
Yeah.
something. What's the course?
It's called On the Presence, and it's taught by a man called Lawrence Follows, whose his training is as an actor, and for a long time it was really only happening in Guelph. So you would have had to come to Guelph to do the course, but in the pandemic, it is now, we have been online now for over a year, and it's been very, very effective online. And it's actually, that's kind of been the silver lining for all of us, is we're now connecting with people all across North America in this same conversation that really had been very Guelph focused. But in Guelph, there's about 500-600 people who have done this course and are in this conversation. So, which I think for me sometimes is why I'm never clear on what's the community that is this On the Presence community that exists here, and what is the Junction Village. Like sometimes those kind of bleed in to one another, and the Junction Village is obviously much smaller than that, but it is kind of really clear to me it's not just about geography. You know, there are many people who I'd say were key members of our community that live on the other side of Guelph, you know, that come and are here and are part of what's being created. So, which makes it blurry sometimes. Yeah.
Thank you. Deanne or Keith, I just wanted to open up the floor to you if you had any thoughts or comments about what between the three of you has been said about intentional communities.
I'd love to just answer a couple of the questions that have come up in the chat.
I was going to get to that.
Oh, okay. Well,
but go ahead. You know what? I will cross them off as you answer that, because some of them are directed.
They're great questions.
They are.
Two questions. One is, what are some reasons why members have left over the years? And then there was a question about kids and co-housing. I think very few people have left in 25 years. I think we probably had 7 sales. Some of that had to do with partners splitting up, but we've had 3 partners split up and stay in community, which has been amazing, so that kids can go back and forth. And and the households are supported by all of us. Some left because of they just didn't like living here. There was a family with 2 kids, and the husband loved it here and the wife hated it here. So they moved down the street a couple of blocks away. I think that's very common too, that couples, one really wants to be here and the other is kind of, either because they are introverts and it's hard for them to have so much community around them. But that couple split up after 30 years of marriage, and we were all devastated. And she's here now. She's had a stroke, and she loves being here, and it's been very supportive for her. So, you know, sometimes it's work, but sometimes it's just, it wasn't a good fit. And they left right away, or they left after years and years of just not being totally satisfied. When we moved in, my daughter was 7, she's 35 now. There were 35 kids here, and it kind of declined because nobody left. So we were becoming a senior community by default. But we had a family who moved in with 5 girls. Well, there were 4, and then a 5th one was born. So they make up like a third of the community. And we now have probably 15 kids. And then we have grandchildren who are now hanging out. I was watching my granddaughter today, and she was playing with twins whose grandparents live here and whose parents and the kids moved here. So we have 3 generations of one family. It's a great place for kids. It's an absolutely amazing, safe. You can never find your kids. You know, they go out and they disappear. Now that you have text, you know, you can text somebody who said, you know, is Jamie over there? Can you send her home for dinner? So kids get co-parented by people, and the family with 5, you know, there's some real growing pains there. There's, you know, mental health issues with one. And so there's another woman who's been single her whole life, never had kids, and she's like the informal grandparent and is doing a huge amount of support for that household, which has split the 5 kids. So their mom's over there, dad's over here, mom's with a new partner, and it all works. It's amazing. So I just wanted to mention those 2.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. I'm wondering then if Mary Kate and Keith have anything to add to. Dan, did you answer? Do you provide training for the caring circles?
Oh, do I?
Yes.
Yes, and also there's a woman in the Caring Council that has done training too. So I will put my email address in the chat so that if you're interested in the training, we can figure something out. And Gina, who's done it, could do you know, webinar style training. So I'll put my email in there and you can follow up with me.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to jump back to the top because I want to make sure I get through all of the questions. One of the questions was, if you could have an accessible home where you are, would you stay? Now, I'm not sure if those are for people who are already in intentional communities. Maybe Monique can clarify. Like, do you mean an individual home, or do you mean in a co-housing community already?
I meant to ask Keith. He mentioned that if, you know, he's finding now that there are many stairs and the way the units were built were causing problems for some of the members. If the community had been built with, you know, seniors in mind, you know, would he stay where he was?
We hope to stay here for until I'm carried out in a box. We do have a reservation at something called a progressive retirement home. Partly we keep that just out of support for that particular unit, which is a nonprofit. When we did this infill, I was 65 at that time, and luckily we are on 1 unit. And furthermore, we had the experience of caring for a neighbor who ended up dying with breast cancer, and we learned some things. She had a small semi-bungalow, but for instance, we have a walk-in shower and not a tub that you have to step up over the edge. So we're pretty good, and we have, going down to the basement common house, we have a stair that runs on a track. It's not functional right at the moment, but we have one member who lives a few blocks away. Everyone else lives right adjacent to us, but she's been a member since the very beginning, and she uses a wheelchair. So that was a partial solution for her, not a great solution. And I think when we get back together, she's always looking to see what kind of option she can come up with. But I think we're going to replace that with a platform lift that goes down the stairs so that she can actually come right in her wheelchair. And she may have to go to a power chair. So I definitely hope to stay. And there was Yeah, our unit is 950 square feet, and it's very well laid out, I must say. We're the middle unit, and yet we've got windows north, south, east, and west, and and a nice deck on the back. And so we are very well set up, and with younger members. And the two youngest members that we have now are both grandchildren of original members. And in the one case, the couple live kind of half time at their lake house about 45 minutes away up in the Gatineau and Quebec side. But their son and his daughter, who is now 12, are the main occupants of that unit. So, and the 3.5-year-old, the guy who is 2 months younger than me, he and his wife bought a house next to us, and actually they bought the house belonging to the person who made the most trouble for us 24 years ago without her knowledge, and renovated, moved in. So they have a lot of stairs and things, but we have given them a lot of support. They've had some health issues over the years, but they ended up buying the house next door for the daughter of our neighbors on the other side, who have now the 3.5-year-old daughter and are doing a rent to own with them for the house. So that's more than you asked for.
That's okay. Keith, I was wondering briefly if you could answer or weigh in on the question, and I think it's a good question, of because your community has been in existence for a while, whether anyone has left, and if so, what are the main reasons why some members would have left?
So the only people, there was one situation where one person bought in, then he had a live-in partner, and then they split, and then he connected with and married, and that was a blended family, and that was part of the whole situation with doing the infill. They needed a bigger place because they were joining two families. The people who have left, as I mentioned, were ones who were either renters or in a few cases owners that were not part of the condo. And I think in one case the couple split up, but I think being younger and people are a bit more mobile and more in transition. There hasn't been anybody, there's been people who have threatened to leave when they've had a spat with somebody, but or said, I don't know why I came here, but we're all still here from that point of view, and even most of the others are still here. So there hasn't been very much mobility. And I'll say too that at this stage, the boundaries of our co-housing community are very fuzzy, because one lady bought across from us and she is married to another lady who doesn't live with her, and they both, each of them have kids. But she's very close to another neighbor who's not part and who has a young child, and you see them going back and forth, dropping stuff on each other's doorsteps, food they've made or things. And there's a whole bunch of kids that are around anywhere from 4 to 9 in the several houses long, and they're masked, they're trying to maintain some distance, but they are just running around like ants and having a great time. And they have, there's a young couple from Peru, and when the COVID first was happening, they're phoning us, say, can we get groceries? What can we do for you? But they are not part of our official community. So as I said, the boundaries are very permeable.
Very interesting. I'm going to move on to this question here about, and maybe Mary Kate can weigh in. Do you have any children living in your intentional community? Is that something you mentioned that you were intergenerational as well? So what do you think that your intentional community has to offer children?
Yeah, for sure. From our perspective, um, we have a bunch of children who live here, and then another like whole group of children who come here quite often. Obviously, in these times that we're in at the moment, it's not the same as how it usually is, where that potluck day sometimes had 100 people in our backyard. You know, like so once a week we would put a table out, and sometimes there were 100 people and events and different things that were happening, and clearly that isn't happening at the moment. But in those times, it's just like yeah, I mean, the backyard, like we are really downtown, but the backyard's quite magical, and it's really set up as a space of play. There's a zip line, and there's like slack line, and there's different structures, and it just sometimes feels like there's like children coming out of each and every place. Like I was having a meeting today on the deck, and there were like children coming down the canoe rack and over here. Like it's a it feels like a space of play, and a bunch of the children who live in the neighborhood also just come in. There's a trampoline and there's different things. So people use this space like a park, and that's really what we want. You know, we encourage people. Sometimes takes people a really long time to understand that we really do mean it when we say, no, we like it when you use it like a park, because people don't, for the most part, know how to come inside a fenced area and be in it. So it's taken a long time for people to feel kind of more comfortable with that. But we also have in the apartment building across the road, we've had those different scenarios as well. We've also had couples who are not together, who have both rented apartments and had a flow of children between spaces. We've got a bunch of people who are single parents and are all supporting each other. You know, we started like a little kids in the hood WhatsApp, so that in these times where people can't just kind of meet in the backyard the way they normally would, there are people who, you know, have smaller kids have been able to connect together and, you know, find out about all sorts of different things. There's a question about liability in that space of play. That is a conversation that we have often had, because of course that is the reason why usually people don't allow people into a space. It's part of the reason why we're in, like, what we want it to be is held in the incorporated entity that we've created, the Junction Village, because that is helpful in that liability perspective. But we've also just decided that like it's more important that our children connect together and play, and that children can live in a world of wonder and play, than that we are always worried from a liability perspective. But it's a conversation that we've had lots of. And we have children coming in all the time, and it's been so beautiful. And you know, we have all sorts of things that there are possibilities that children could get damaged on, with zip line, slack line, trampoline, different things. But touch wood, for the most part, everything has been fine over the last 15, 16 years. I would also say that like the multi-generational part of it is still in formation. You know, like one of the reasons that we created this community was that both my husband and I lost our mothers we had little kids. Our mothers would have been central in our lives, and we lost them a year apart. And so I was pregnant with my second child, and I don't have a lot of family. Most of my family lives in England or Ireland. And I was like, part of what was behind the creation of this community was to bring grandmothers into our midst. And and we've also been trying to plan spaces for how we would age there, and we've done a big renovation of our house, and we created a 60-year plan, so 60-year plan for what that space could be like and how it would function. And so we've created it so that people could live on one floor, and real accessibility thoughts in terms of how it is, and the same is happening with how we will design and how we are starting to design that house next door, that when we don't have a family, probably we won't live in that house, we'll be living next door in that shared space. So it's also about having a lot of flow in and out, like in how it's changed over the years. And just to go back to people leaving the community, like we are not set up at the moment in that shared ownership sort of way. So there's actually quite a bit of flow in and out of these spaces that form the center of it. But quite often people, say, who are renting in the apartment building will actually buy a house close by. Like that's usually an intention of people if they are leaving the apartment, and people don't tend to leave the apartment very often, but if they're leaving, it's often to buy close by, which is in a lot of ways not really leaving the community. They're just transitioning, and that it kind of just keeps growing, but it's a bit amorphous as to what is the community. I think as other communities are also finding the same thing.
Thank you, Mary Kate. Speaking of design, we do have a question about design. And I'd like to hear from all three panelists. Speaking to the design of the units you live in, as you've grown into the space, are there any things that you would have done differently? So for example, no stairs, or have more square footage or less square footage, storage, open concept. They're saying, help us save ourselves from making any errors before we build. And Sweet Fern also has, would love to hear from all three. We haven't heard from Deanne for a bit, so maybe we can hear from her first. Go ahead.
No, great question. We're on 27 acres. We built on 4 of the acres. The houses are a little bit spread apart, but one of the things that we chose to do that has caused a lot of accessibility issues is building on the hill. So we built on a slope, and then flat area was saved for gardens and animals and that sort of thing. And that allowed us to have walkout basements. So my unit, for example, is a very small cape, but I have a walkout basement. On the other hand, in the middle of winter when it's icy, that is a terrible thing that we have. And we work as hard as we can. We have teams, I'm on it, to go out and clear the pathway. So it's a huge negative that we bought into from the start. Storage is always an issue. We chose not to do garages because we couldn't afford it. And now, we're scraping ice and snow off the cars every winter, scraping off each other's cars. That's what we do. We help each other and go out, and there's a festival of clearing. One thing I will say that, and I don't know if it's specifically about design, our square footage, a lot of it had to do with getting the price of the houses to fit what people could afford. We were 100% pre-sold. So I think accessibility into the houses, because again, on the slope, a number of our houses, you have to go upstairs to get to the first floor. So I think, and also we bought into having parking all clustered. We have 2 major parking lots, and that I think was a big mistake. That again, being on the hill, the houses up here at the top, it's very hard to get to them. We should have thought about dispersed parking, but we bought in, in 1990, we bought into what I call the California model of co-housing, where everybody's got open porches, and everything's flat and sunny, and they didn't have the issues that New England does.
So you would
So,
suggest, Deanne, instead of big clustered parking spots, dispersed parking? Not something you often see, but I'm curious.
right, that I
Okay.
would do, you know, some clustered, like most of it could be in the 2 we have, and then maybe have 2 at the high part of, because of the uniqueness of our, it really depends on your space.
Right.
And if you're doing urban, it's a whole different issue. Storage is always, there's never enough storage.
Well, that's good to know. Before we move on, Keith was asking, and I have the same question, what is the square footage or the range of square footage of your units?
When I moved in, I've added on to my unit. When I moved in, the footprint was 650 square feet with a bathroom and a bedroom on the first floor, so pretty small. And then upstairs under the cape were 2 very small bedrooms. And then the largest units, so I had one of the smallest units, the largest units were a 1,600 square foot footprint, 2 full floors. Some have, you know, walkout basement or underground basement. So a big range, 4 different styles.
Okay, 4 different styles. Okay, that's interesting. I'm just making notes here as you talk. So I'd like to hear from Keith about do's and don'ts of design.
We were constrained by the fact that finding these houses, 2 triples for sale at the same time beside each other after 5 years of searching, and this was a last ditch effort to make something happen. There was one couple who had recently retired and were on a year's sabbatical traveling around in southwestern United States, and they managed to reach them by phone and they said, buy. And so they bought in sight unseen. So definitely the design, I'll say the design of our unit is extremely good, and it could almost be made fully accessible. Our friend who uses a wheelchair has things like the upper cupboards that pull down in her kitchen and features like that. But our unit could easily be made into as a fully accessible unit. But the others much harder to. They've got narrow staircases and basements that are like 5 feet high, made out of old rubble stone foundations. So that's problematic, but we basically didn't have a choice in that. One thing that I will say is that we are located close to everything, including mainline public transportation buses. We're pretty handy to hospitals, kind of down the street about 1.5 kilometers. And we walk for our groceries to the supermarket. And so there's the location that we have is quite amenable to that. I can't think of, as I would say, a walk-in shower is a good thing to have as you get older, with grab bars, of course, and you know, an elevator or some kind of accessible arrangement to get to your common house. I'll mention that I visited quite a number of co-housing communities in Canada, and the one whose layout I really like is Pacific Gardens in Nanaimo. We have friends from Ottawa who moved there. They have a big open concept with an indoor kind of mall and a music room and a dining room, and big doors that open at the ends of this mall to let fresh air come through. It's, to me, it's just lovely. I've seen there's a number of others that are kind of similar to that, are individual houses, and I think they're less conducive to a collaboration, community living, and secondly, you know, to living with as low a footprint as you can on the earth.
Yeah, thank you, Keith. I do see another question. How does your common house support well-being? So whether it's physical activity or what, maybe we, Mary Kate can weigh in on that. I know that the common house is a home, but how do you think that it promotes well-being of the community?
Yeah, well, and the plan that we have for the common house will like have a big central kitchen, and that what we're hoping from that design perspective, just weaving those two together, that kitchen will also have almost a greenhouse off the side of it, so that there will be year-round growing right accessible to the kitchen, and then doors that open right out into a big outdoor kitchen space as well, so that it's really set up for people to come together around food. So, I mean, I think the common house is the most important thing. And how does it contribute to well-being? I like even what's happening in our backyard, and what I will be happening, and what does happen in our own house in these times, I think will all transfer over to that common house vision. And the other thing that I really like around what's kind of come into being in our common house is we have these alcoves as well. So we have spaces where people can stay, it's like adult bunk beds. They're like a room that has 6 spaces, but they're beautifully designed and really well set up. And I mean, obviously they aren't completely full at the moment. We've had to really reduce how many people are in there, but that's, I think, a key, is to have lots of places where people can come and stay, that there's like multiple different ways for people being part of that community space. And eventually what we will build will be little micro apartments, so that everyone will share that big common kitchen area, but they'll kind of have their own living room, bedroom, bathroom space, and some of those will be designed with more than one bedroom. So I think kind of having that flow of different spaces and having it be something that can change in lots of different ways, I think is really important. And I was just trying to write down some of the other things that, like in terms of the flow and the design. That one really important thing that for us was this book called The Pattern Language. So I don't know if people know that book or not, but that, like, some of the design principles from that have been like hugely important in how the spaces have been designed. Like we have in our house, we have like there's a flow around the kitchen. So everything's designed in circles, and the space just really works really, really well. So like our kids all like that they all learned to ride their bike actually around the kitchen island. Like they just would go round and round, and they spent kind of the winter COVID times, like one of them on a unicycle and one on roller skates, and like, but because there was this circle, it really worked beautifully. So I think, yeah, lots of the principles from that I think are really important.
Thanks, Mary Kate. Are there any communities in particular that either you visited or, and this is a question from Chris Stevens through Cohousing Options Canada, any communities that you've visited or that you're connected to that inspire you, either from a design perspective or a human cultural perspective?
Is that to me or to other?
Yeah, you could start if you'd like.
Yeah, well, I just recently attended this conference called Rebuild. I don't know if anyone else was on that, but it was all about creating regenerative villages, and it was like all over the world. And some of the images in that of like it actually, what was useful to me is because sometimes I feel like, oh, well, like what we're doing is really out there, and people, you know, like think it's like something really different. And what was beautiful was like connecting with people all across the world who are like made what we're doing seem like just so easy and doable. They're looking at it on a whole village perspective, and I'm like, oh, like we just have these 3 houses, like that's and but like to me, what I have felt has like what's been really useful is when it's when there are spaces that are actually meeting everybody's needs. So introverts can go and find little places to hide with a book, and extroverts can come together in huge groups. And like it's like everybody's needs. Children have places where they can go, but it's just like it's a space that is light, connected to outdoor spaces and nature, and there's something for everybody. I to me, that's what I think we're trying to aim to create.
Thanks, Mary Kate. I was wondering if Deanne wanted to weigh in.
Yeah, I want
yeah.
to jump in. I think this is I want to go to the first question. Promoting well-being. So there's physical spaces. We have an exercise, and we have a walkout basement that was unfinished when we moved into the common house. And we have an exercise room, we have a bike room, and what was really cool that somebody started was a bike fleet, so that you don't have to own your own bike. You can just go out and you can sign out a bike. Like we've taken bikes on vacation with us, take 2 bikes for a week and, bring them back. There's a meditation room that supports small meetings as well as a weekly meditation group. And there's also socially, we have a book group, we have a knitting group, and this includes people from outside the community. It's porous, it's not just the members. We have a sunroom, so that even though our great room is pretty big, if you want to have a birthday party with 10 people, there's a sunroom with French doors, and you can have a more intimate space for a class or a celebration. So a lot of classes, learning. We've had cooking classes in the kitchen. I am very, very opinionated about kitchen design, and I think we did a really great job. And part of it was going to visit a lot of communities and seeing what didn't work. I was a chair of the kitchen committee and fell in love with what Nyland community did in Colorado. And we brought back a lot of ideas. A lot of kitchens are open, and so they're noisy. If you want to use the great room that's right next door, we could have our kitchen open, but we could also close it down. And also the way it was set up for different cooking practices, because all of our cook teams are different people, different heights, different interests. So I think we could do a whole workshop on kitchen design. And I will say, as by way of advice, to visit communities, and you can do that online. Go look at their designs, go look at those photos, see if you can contact somebody about the kitchen or about the spaces that work and don't work. We also have a kids room, two guest rooms. We have a lot of what other co-housing common houses have. We have an octagon porch, which I don't think we've screened it in for about 10 years, but that became a beloved space once it got screened in. We have bugs, we have mosquitoes, but it's a great space. We have a great front porch that gets used a ton, and a play yard that's right attached next to the common house. So yeah.
Great.
I'll stop there.
Okay, I know Keith wants to weigh in. I'm not sure which question, and I know that we've heard from Keith that Pacific Gardens in Nanaimo kind of inspired him, but let's hear more.
So I was thinking about the question, what has our common house contributed to well-being? And I'll say not only to our members' well-being, we do have recently got a, what do you call it, a treadmill, walking machine, and also a table tennis set up down there, which we don't have a huge amount of space. So those, it's challenging to store them out of the way. We've and there are laundry facilities there that some families use entirely, don't have their own. Some families have their own laundry facilities and others just use the common ones. We've had neighborhood gatherings there for holiday music. We've had house concerts. One of our members has his own band and has had different bands from time to time. We've hosted meetings for refugee support groups and had parties, welcoming parties for refugee families that have arrived. We have hosted, there's a group called Sustainable Living Ottawa East that has created a number of things, including a community garden, a farmer's market, and something called the Rideau River Nature Trail. That all emanated out of our common house meetings. And so, and people now are sometimes using it for workspace, for exercise, etc. And of course, we have to maintain distance or wear masks if there's more than one person there. But so it's, and that's where we have our shared meals. There is a kitchen. Oh, and we have a sauna in that area, and we have a guest room. So sometimes relatives, some members had relatives who their parents lived far away on the West Coast and would come and stay for a couple of weeks. And we have a hot tub that's shared outside. So those are all things that are enhancements to the facilities that make life better for everybody.
Thank you, Keith. I'm wondering if we can do a wrap-up question now. I'm just being mindful of the time and seeing that it's getting a little bit late, at least for me. The last question is for all three of you. And it's, is there anything that the three of you want to leave with us in terms of advice to ensure the well-being of community members, for either an intentional community or a co-housing group? Are there any golden nuggets of advice to ensure the well-being of the community? Let's start with Mary Kate.
Sure. I would say the one piece of advice that I would have for anyone who's venturing down this path is to come up with some sort of training that you are all doing together that provides a common language, a common understanding, and like a something that is work that you have all done together. And lots of communities use nonviolent communication. In our community, it's the on the presence work. But without that glue, it just means when you get to that time where there's an extra stressor, as COVID has been, then you just don't have the resilience. And I really noticed in this time how resilient our community was. And I was very thankful for this years of work that we have all been doing together. So it doesn't really matter what you choose to do, but it's great if there's something that you're all doing together and bringing something in. So I think to me that's the main nugget, I would say, in terms of well-being. And really it goes back to love. It goes back to creating something that means that you're able to stay in a space of love flowing in that community, and without something that just deals with the functional constraints of humans that we all have. Until you're in something like that, then shut down in love is what occurs. So
that's a really good point, Mary Kate. And I have to say that even Sweet Fern, it almost feels like we're in a a bit of a pressure cooker because things are moving really quickly all of a sudden, and we're kind of, I don't know what the word is in English for it, but thrown off keel. And I think it's important to have that kind of anchor. And so you're saying that that anchor could be whether it's nonviolent communication or something that kind of drives us back together, the compassion to kind of make sure that we stay resilient throughout those tough periods. I think that's a really good message to hang on to. So thank you for that. Diane, did you, what is your golden nugget?
I would completely underscore what Mary Kate said. We have done trainings and we've wrapped it. One thing that I've encouraged other communities that I've worked with is doing a retreat every year, doing a weekend retreat that everybody plans. We do ours the second weekend in November, and it's a combination of social fun and big picture thinking. And every few years we would do, well, in the early years we did training. So the weekend would be training. We did training in facilitation, training in nonviolent communication, training in anti-racism like 15 years ago. That is really binding. I mean, that really brings you together to share a learning. And we would bring in outside trainers to work with us. And I would say facilitation is core because having effective meetings, having effective communication is so crucial to be able to move from me to we. That's what all of us have to learn how to do, is move from me to we. Because when you get down to those hard decisions, it's what do I want? And over the years, you will learn it's what do we need? What is best for the community? And to really shift from our culture that's about me to we, to really becoming a community member. So the training, having fun, and putting aside time to do that is key, because we did it from 2 years before we moved in all the way through, and we do it we have a no talent show on Saturday night. We have a slideshow on Friday night of pictures where we all fall in love with each other all over. We have people who put it to, corny music, and we're all like, ooh, ah, and it's very sweet. So that's my nugget.
I love that. I totally, what you're saying resonates, because I think yes, it was you that was saying that sometimes, especially in families or a couple, there's usually one that's really into it, and maybe there's one that's a little more reticent. And I think some of that does come from the fact that we do live in kind of this individualistic society. So the idea of co-housing might be tough, when we're often thinking about me and not the we. I love the idea of an annual retreat. It gets me thinking of, like, board meetings have these strategic plans that they put in place, and why not apply that to a co-housing community too, right? You need to have that forward thinking. So I think that's a really good point. Last but never least, Keith, what is your golden nuggets?
So I would endorse the annual retreat idea. We go to a place called Stillwaters that's about an hour and a half from here. They have their own little private lake. It's in the middle of nowhere and an off-grid big lodge, and we just have fun together there. And we do talk about what we want, but we try to keep it as informal. I guess if I had a nugget, it would be hang in there, be the little engine that could. It's a hard challenge to get a co-housing community going. The success rate isn't good, but it can be done. We struggled through, and I want to say I'm really inspired by this discussion. I'm inspired by what's happening in Guelph and Diane's group, and I'm inspired by Sweet Fern. I think you're on the right track, and I wish you good success.
We really appreciate that, especially at this time. Thank you. I see Joanne and Jean applauding you. They love that. But I told them to mute, so you can't hear them. Oh, and now there's a plane here. Okay. All right. So if anybody wishes to reach out to our panelists, I hope that they wouldn't mind if we share their email addresses with any of the people here. I see some thumbs up.
Yep.
Just want to make sure that I have everyone's consent. Okay, awesome. So if anybody wishes to reach out, we can maybe share the email addresses of our panelists. So I'm just going to do, oh, there you go. We already have Mary Kate's email address there if you want it. So on behalf of Cohabitat Sweet Fern Cohousing, I just want to thank everybody for attending this evening, and a special thanks to our panelists who have shared their personal stories and their knowledge and their wealth of experience. We're certainly going to draw on that to give us strength for this next phase for Sweet Fern. And please remember to check out our website. I can't overstate how these types of discussions, even though, you know, throughout this pandemic, Zoom is kind of all we have, but these types of discussions, I don't know that they would be happening if we weren't getting used to Zoom. You know, would we be speaking to somebody from Massachusetts? I don't know. So it really reinvigorates our growing communities. So a really big thank you. And Sweet Fern is also happy to answer any questions that you may have. So the door is open. Please don't be shy to reach out. That wraps up this evening. And Keith, when things open up, we will come and see you in Ottawa, because I went to school there. I love Ottawa, and I would be happy to stop by. And Joanne and Jean have raved about terra firma, so we're looking forward to seeing it. All right, thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you for facilitating. Thank you, everyone, for being
My
here.
pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks to everyone.
Thank
It was great.
Great job, Renee.
Good luck.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, Diane.
Really,
Yeah.
really wonderful event.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'll just wait for everyone to sign out before I end. I'll give it
So Harriet,
another couple.
did you like it?
Did I like it?
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Oh,
Yes.
my.
I'm going to stop recording.